Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Chart 1-3 in the Blue Azar book, 5th edition, and that is talking about stative verbs. You might also have heard of these called non-action verbs. If you see the two words, they mean the same thing. Okay? Stative verbs, non-action verbs, the same. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of sentences to get started talking about this. First, look at this sentence. Right now, we blank study grammar. Take a minute and think. Or, if you're watching this with somebody, talk to the person next to you, because that's even better. What do you think we should write here? What form of study should we write here? Right now, we blank study grammar. You can pause if you want some more time to think. Okay, here we go. So, what I think you probably said was, right now, we are studying grammar. And the reason that you probably said that was the words right now. Usually, when we're talking about something that happens right now, we use present progressive. We use be plus verb ing. Or am is are. That's even a better way to say it. Present progressive is am, is, are, plus verb ing. So, when we're talking about something right now, when we're talking about something that's happening right now, we usually use present progressive. Okay, now, so far, I hope, so good. Take a look at this next sentence, please. Right now, I blank want a cup of coffee. Right now, I blank want a cup of coffee. Again, take a minute and think. Again, you can pause the video or talk to somebody next to you. What form of want do I want to put in that sentence? Okay, I'm going to assume you paused if you wanted time to think. If you said, right now, I want to get a cup of coffee, you're absolutely right. But then that raises a question, doesn't it? I'm talking about, what time am I talking about? Right now. So, I just said here, when we're talking about something happening now, we usually use present progressive. Well, this is now. Why did I use a different verb tense? Why did I use simple present? Okay? That's a very good question. Here's the rule that you need to know and that you will need to remember. Some verbs in English do not use present progressive. Some verbs in English do not use present progressive. Let me write that here. Some verbs in English do not use present progressive. So usually, when I'm talking about right now, I will use present progressive. But for some verbs, I won't use present progressive. Those don't use present progressive. So if I'm talking about present, I'll just use simple present. Now, that raises a question. How do I know? How do I know which verbs work normally and they use present progressive for right now? How do I know which verbs don't do this? Unfortunately, I have some bad news. Well, I actually have good news and I have bad news. The good news is, well, let me give you the bad news first. The bad news is there's really no good rule that you can memorize, that you can learn to tell which verbs use present progressive and which verbs do not. Okay? Most verbs use present progressive. Normal verbs use present progressive, but some do not. But that's the bad news. There's no good rule. Good news. There is a list. And you can find a pretty good list in this book on page 7. If you're using a different edition of an Azar book, then you can find it on a different page. But there will be a list of stative verbs. Also, if you Google the words stative verbs or non-action verbs, if you do a web search, you'll find many lists of non-action or stative verbs in English. And those, some are longer, some are shorter. The ones in the book, the one in the book is a relatively short list, but it's the most important ones, the ones you'll probably need to know. Also, if you'd like a list, if you look at the book that I wrote on verb tenses, you can get a free copy. Just Google, if you Google Kent Uchiyama, verb tenses, then you will you'll find the book. You can download it for free, and it has a whole big section on stative verbs. Okay, now I want to give you a couple more pieces of information about stative verbs. Okay. Some verbs in English can be both stative and normal. I talk about that in the book, so I'm not going to go into it in the video because it would take a very long time. But if you're interested in learning more about it, definitely get the book. It's free. No reason not to, right? Another point, the verbs that do not use present progressive in English, and let's just go through those, some of those. I'll look at the book. So some common words are that don't use present progressive. Some common stative verbs are know, believe, doubt, recognize, remember, suppose, understand, like, appreciate, care about, please, prefer. Also love and hate are almost need, want. Those are all some very common stative verbs that we don't use in present progressive. Again, list on page 7. So these verbs are not used in present progressive, but they are also not used in the other progressive tenses in English. We haven't talked about the other the other progressive tenses in English yet, but there are several. Let's see. There's present progressive and past progressive. There is present perfect progressive and past perfect progressive. There is future progressive and future perfect progressive. So we actually have 6 progressive tenses in English. These verbs right here, like need, want, like, all of these verbs here on page 7, we don't use them usually in any of the progressive tenses. Now, there are some exceptions. Like I said, some of them are a little more complicated. I list those in the book. So if you Google Kent Uchiyama verb tenses, and if you forgot that, rewind, you can see it again. Anyway, those are stative verbs. If you want to know more, read the book. Again, download the book, read it. Also, if you look at the chart, it'll give you some more examples. Okay, I hope that helps.